Before we start, I just want to do a shout out to my daughter. She actually sat with me and talked through some of the issues in the game and was able to critique quite fairly, so maybe we'll have a new writer soon. On paper, if Ratchet and Clank and Zelda had a baby, it would be something like XEL. Indie team Assemble Entertainment have taken on the unenviable task of bringing a large, brand new IP to multiple consoles at the same time. And just check out that multi-platform trailer. It's really a testament to what's possible with... Hold on, what? Sorry.
I know, I look pretty muscular.
Oh, why are you walking like that? Did you just levitate? 60 frames per minute. Oh dear. What's happened to XEL on Switch? Let's find out. A short disclaimer. I can only work with what I've got, and this is the release build that I've got. I will do my best to form a coherent picture of what's available, but as we've seen many times in the past, with things like Pine, Baldo, and a few others, there is only so much that I can do. As far as narrative goes, it's quite an interesting premise. You play as Reed as she crash lands aboard the Ark. This is essentially a spaceship that houses what remains of humanity. She's suffering from amnesia, of course, and there's a problem with this world, and to keep it going, you have to sort it out. It's all very standard, but it is nice to see an indie developer try and do voice acting for every member of the cast. Unfortunately, as we'll go into in that section, it's broken.
To a crisp by this gigantic and stupid Overwatch.
On to gameplay and controls then. XEL is a traditional top-down action adventure. However, it uses a stamina-based combat system. You can lock on with the left trigger, attack with B, and you can also roll around. Early on, you'll get access to a shield, and this also requires stamina to block, which was an interesting decision, and this mechanic doesn't seem to work quite right at the moment, with projectiles sometimes passing through your shield and a great deal of stamina being taken from each hit. Attacks are delivered with a single button press. These work well enough, with a few forward frames for each swing, and enemies are reasonably easy, with very slow telegraphed patterns allowing you to roll out of the way. During the story, you'll also have some companions join you. Unfortunately, their artificial intelligence doesn't seem to exist. When facing down a group of enemies, they may stand still, or if you're lucky, rotate in a small circle while watching you do all of the work. There are several puzzle segments that involve pushing blocks, finding keys, and opening doors. As with traditional Zelda, there's no jump button, but when you reach certain edges, you'll jump off. I say certain edges because it doesn't apply to all of them, which felt a bit unusual as some of these look signposted for jumps and you plummet to your death. Oh, and there's also currently no autosave system. So if you die without making a manual save or close the game down, you'll lose all of your progress. But there are a number of checkpoints which are quite well signposted, and it's easy enough. As you move throughout this world, you'll have certain objectives. These are shown down here via a dialogue box. A slight issue is that they're not shown anywhere else. You might have a task instructing you to go to the wastelands. Well, that's okay, you might think, let's look at the mapping system. Alright, where's the wastelands? Hang on, none of these areas are called the wastelands. But I'll follow the indicator, the waypoint. Oh wait, there isn't one. You can see where this is going. Now, I understand the need for exploration, and that's absolutely fine, but there's not enough in the way of narrative signposting to direct the player, and as such, you'll find yourself in headless chicken mode. The combat at its core isn't too bad. I quite enjoyed the simplistic system, but enemies will very often be unable to lock onto you, and they seem to randomly respawn. Sometimes they'd respawn upon death, which makes sense, but at other times they just reappeared. The health system's very traditional, with 3 hearts available to the player, and enemies will drop very, very small ones of these that you can barely see, but upon collecting those it will restore your health. I did suffer a few deaths from not realizing that my health was very low, as here, if you've got half a heart left, there's no visual indication of that, apart from a few seconds later when you find yourself sleeping with the fishes. I also suffered an issue with the chests. There are many chests that are pivotal to your progression that contain either a key or another item that you need, and a few times they simply wouldn't open. I couldn't select them, I had to do a little run around, come back, and then they would open. Back on the subject of movement, I found it slightly strange that there was no sprint, especially with the stamina system in place. You can use the roll, but you'll only be able to do 2 or 3 before you're back to plodding along. If the game ran absolutely perfectly, with none of the issues mentioned so far, it would still need improvement in terms of the waypoint system, general navigation, and unusual implementations of dodge moves. There are certain boss enemies that you cannot dodge the moves of, but in the rare moments where everything's working okay, the core design here shows real potential. It's very frustrating, but right now, based solely on the good aspects that actually work, I'd give gameplay 5 out of 20. And controls, they're marginally better, but having chests that won't open or characters you can't talk to and lacking some basics like being able to sprint and a stamina system that goes down too fast, as it stands that scores 6 out of 20. And that takes me on to visuals, performance and audio. Now the game is targeting 30 frames per second and it runs on the Unity engine, but even when it's hitting 30, it's completely stuttery. It's a mess. It makes you feel nauseous almost all the time. The frame pacing seems to be all over the shop, and that's when it's running maxed out. When the drops in frame rate come and the loading stutters, things get really bad. You're looking at the tens, maybe 10 to 15 frames per second at times. As you can imagine, when it's like this, trying to lock onto enemies or perform any kind of action becomes very difficult. And then the image quality bugs kick in. As you move about the world, entire areas will load in, sometimes seconds after you've arrived. This also applies to the shadows on the ground, which incidentally seem to be made up of about 3 pixels. And then there's the textures. I'll read you my daughter's notes on these, which she very succinctly put. These are mostly bad. They look unfinished, like the patterns from a cheap hotel wall. I mean, there you go. They are very bad. The resolution maps of these is incredibly low. It looks like Vaseline has been smeared on every surface. All of this obviously carries over into handheld mode as well. So we have low resolution, low frame rates, lighting and shadow problems, entire assets glitching in and out of the environment, artificial intelligence that's essentially broken, item chests which often don't work. But guess what? We're not actually at the worst part. Oh no, that was when I met this guy. As you can see, he has hidden a pair of ice skates in the game, and he uses those wherever he goes. He doesn't have to tell you about it, he doesn't want to brag, but there they are. Oh, and the floating lady. Oh, and the assets that haven't been added into the world that you can see off the edge of the screen sometimes when you rotate the camera. There is one area that partially works in XEL on Switch, and that's the audio.
So excited. We actually got on the ship.
Now, as mentioned, the game's fully voice acted, and that's incredibly impressive for a small indie team. Some of the voice actors here do a really nice job. Others, not so much, but it's still commendable to find that in a game of this budget. Now, unfortunately, there are, yes, you guessed it, some bugs with the audio system. Firstly, the dialogue seems to automatically skip itself. So you'll be halfway through someone's speech and it will just skip to the next person. They'll get a few words in and it will skip to the next. They're obviously in a real hurry, so much so they don't want to show you the dialogue they put into the game. The music is excellent, absolutely excellent. I was really impressed with the soundtrack. And for the first 10 minutes when everything was running well, I was really excited to dive into this on Switch and experience what they created. But as I'm sure you're aware by now, there's only so much I can do. Visuals and performance score 1 out of 20. Sound and audio scores 10 out of 20. XEL retails on Switch at around about £17, or your regional equivalent, but I'm not entirely sure if they've pulled it from the shop, if this is actually going to release tomorrow on the 14th, but I can't find hide nor hair of it. And honestly, if they have done that, then fair play to them, that's the right decision. You can't release a game like this. As far as value goes for the player right now, well, if you could stomach all of those bugs and issues, and you just focused on the areas that worked, I think you could get a 2 out of 20. XEL is an action-adventure that had huge potential, and watching reviews of it on other platforms, while it has some of these issues, it's no way near the mess that the Nintendo Switch is. As it stands, it's almost unplayable and shouldn't be purchased by anyone. Absolute respect to the developers for trying to release multiple at the same time, and if you have pulled it down before release to patch it up, then I will be the first person to revisit it, go over the performance improvements, everything you've done. Yeah, feel free to hit me up. Currently, it gets a SwitchUp score of 24%. Let me know in the comments, is this one that you're interested in, or have been, or were? And yeah, I've tried to be fair. Thanks to our Patreons and to all of you that enjoy the channel. And for all things Switch, oh, and a thanks to my daughter, for all things Switch all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers, guys. See ya!
The sky fell. Literally.